than 400 popular books and essays that have been published about his prophecies. His name still appears in newspaper headlines, and his image looks out to us from tabloid pages, movie posters, and book jackets that all promise to give us a glimpse of a real man. But how much of the wizardly impression that we have come to associate with Nostradamus is based on fact? Of the few historical records that exist, there are two artifacts in particular that many believe preserve a realistic image of the man. The first is the portrait of Nostradamus painted by his son, Caesar.
Caesar was quite a good painter. What the portrait shows us is a man with a very broad, smiling face, ready to crack a joke. The image in the portrait seems to inspire quite a bit of confidence. It's almost like he's your favorite grandfather come to comfort you. But there's a twinkle in his eye. He seems to say, oh, I can be quite funny, oh, I can be serious and intense.
Experts believe the second true description of Nostradamus was written by one of his closest confidants.
This is the description of Nostradamus by his secretary, Chavigny. He was a somewhat less than average height, physically robust, lively and vigorous. He had a broad, open brow, a straight, even nose, and grey eyes, whose gaze was gentle but which blazed when he was angry. His cheeks were crimson, even in extreme old age. His beard was long and thick. His countenance was both severe and smiling, so that his severity was seen to be tempered with great humanity. For the rest, he was alert, subject to sudden, instant rages, yet a patient worker. He slept only 4 or 5 hours a night.
The era in which Nostradamus lived was a time of transition. As the fear and uncertainty of the Middle Ages was coming to an end, a new era was beginning. With the dawn of the Renaissance, the entire view of the universe was starting to change. Nowhere was this more apparent than inside the walls of Saint-Remy, the French provincial town where Nostradamus was born.
Saint-Remy retains its medieval flavor, including a sewer in the middle of the street. It looks much the same as it would have in Nostradamus' time.
Author and guide Vincent Bridges has traced Nostradamus' legacy from its earliest beginnings in Saint-Remy to this street address, number 6, Rue Hoch.
Nostradamus was born in this house in 1503. In all probability, it was his grandmother's dwelling.
Mother acted as a midwife, basically. And the latest research is that, in fact, the house where he grew up was a rather ampler property next door.
He was baptized Michel de Notre Dame, a Catholic name that means Our Lady. It was adopted by Nostradamus' Jewish grandfather when he converted to Catholicism during the Spanish Inquisition, a time when Jews in Europe were persecuted. In spite of the religious repression of the time, the south of France was cosmopolitan and alive with myth, magic, and the excitement of advances in medicine, mathematics, and astronomy.
More than the perfect place, it's probably the only place in Europe that someone like Nostradamus could have been trained, taught, and allowed to reach his fulfillment.
Young Michel de Notre Dame was intrigued by such studies at a very early age.
His paternal grandfather, Jean de Saint-Remy, was the town councillor and perhaps physician. So there was a tradition of learning in the family. So Nostradamus would very early on have learned Latin, probably a little Hebrew, and mathematics.
In addition to the rudiments of mathematics, Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, his grandfather introduced him to the celestial sciences. And it is from his grandfather that he probably inherited his astrolabe, the medieval instrument that was once used to determine the altitude of the sun and other celestial bodies. Nostradamus would later write of the astronomical wonders that inspired his interest in astrology.
Jupiter being more joined to Venus than to the moon, appearing in white fullness, Venus hidden under the whiteness of Neptune, struck by Mars through the Milky Way.
While some believe this poem suggests Nostradamus had predicted the orbits of the planets, he most likely got the idea in 1543, when the Polish astronomer Nicholas Copernicus published his theory of the solar system in a book called Revolutions of the Heavenly Spheres. But if his early interest in astronomy was inspired by his grandfather, his surroundings kindled his passion for antiquity.
Provence is multi-layered with history, and Saint-Rémy is one of those places where history is just stacked up, one ruin on top of another.
For the young Nostradamus, the most vivid and direct connection with another time lay not in the supernatural, but just a few hundred yards south of his home in Saint-Rémy.
Nostradamus played here as a child. It was his first introduction to the ancient history of the region. In 6 quatrains, he predicted that a great mystery or buried treasure would be found in this region.
Unto the ancient vestal edifices, the mausoleum in the cavern of goats, the booty will be taken from between 2 rocks.
At the foot of Les Alpes, a balding range of limestone mountains, stood the entrance to an ancient Roman city called Glanum, complete with a mausoleum and triumphal arch. The treasure or booty Nostradamus predicted may have been a large portion of the city that was not to be discovered and excavated until 1921. Had he seen the future? We may never know the answer, but certainly this place inspired young Nostradamus.